The program Signs of Orofacial Pain and Temporomandibular Disorders program will present the next concept. Council members Sanford and Alvarez will lead the discussion.
Great, thank you. So this concept is the Temporomandibular Disorders Collaborative for Improving Patient-Centered Translational Research, or TMD impact. Next slide, please. The primary goal of this concept is to advance TMD basic and clinical research, research training, and translation to evidence-based treatments and improved clinical care via the establishment of a national, interdisciplinary, trans-NIH, patient-centered research collaborative. And I know this was a mouthful, so I want to emphasize that this is intended for this collaborative to tackle TMD research broadly, so that it includes and is more than being just about TMD-related pain. It would include other aspects of TMD research as well, from tissue engineering and regeneration to prevention to building the evidence base for existing treatments or developing new treatments. I also want to highlight the interdisciplinary nature of this concept to be implemented in the composition of the investigative teams as well as their approaches, including the consideration of comorbidities and co-occurring pain conditions, and to be enhanced by trans-NIH support and perspectives. And finally, it's important to reiterate that the research of the collaborative will be patient-centered, meaning that the knowledge generated will be clinically meaningful to ultimately improve quality of care. Next slide, please. TMD research and patient care lags behind advances in other musculoskeletal, joints, and pain disorders, as many of you probably already know, due to factors such as heterogeneous etiologies in an area that's encased in hard and soft cartilage and bone that can be difficult to access. A couple of examples of how TMD research lags is in the area of monoclonal antibody and small molecule therapeutics for TMDs. Arenumab AOE, a monoclonal antibody with specific activity on calcitonin gene-related peptide, or CGRP receptors, was approved for the prevention of migraines in 2018 by the FDA, yet is only now beginning phase 2 clinical trials for off-label use in TMD pain management, as just one example. Small molecules have also been an area of considerable focus in developing potential therapeutics in other pain conditions. The FDA recently approved Qulipta and Atogepant as the first and only oral CGRP receptor antagonist specifically developed for the preventive treatment of migraine, but no equivalent small molecule therapeutic exists for TMD-related pain. A significant gap is the lack of clear stratification of patients into clinically meaningful and mechanistically based phenotypic subgroups, which has hindered the identification of clear etiological targets for the development of effective evidence-based treatments or even their clinical endpoints. So how will this initiative address these gaps and advances towards patient-centered solutions to TMDs? Well, this collaborative has the potential to provide the coordinated interdisciplinary platform to support large-scale studies, integrate across studies and projects, and provide a cohesive research strategy. Complex disorders require multifaceted, complex solutions. Such a platform would be well poised to employ systems biology and whole person approaches that include biopsychosocial factors and comorbidities, as well as coordinate across repositories and serve central data resource functions. And one of the objectives of the collaborative would also be to build the pipeline of interdisciplinary TMD investigators, which this interdisciplinary infrastructure would be uniquely suited to do. Next slide, please. So specific areas of interest for this concept include mechanistic underpinnings of clinically meaningful stratified subgroups and phenotypes, and the identification and validation of etiological targets for the diagnosis, prevention, treatments, or their clinical endpoints. The establishment of best practices for integrated clinical management in the context of co-occurring pain conditions or comorbidities. the adaptation and utilization of novel cutting-edge technologies or the development of new tools and technologies to facilitate access to the temporomandibular joint and the unique orofacial physiology, and to advance current standards of detection and measurement. Also, the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning, including computational methods for large data sets for purposes such as integration of data from various animal models, distinguishing disease subtypes, developing individualized clinical decision support, and predicting patient responses. Another area of interest is strengthening the evidence base for existing treatments, including mechanistic studies, pragmatic trials, and comparative effectiveness trials, as well as the development and dissemination of new evidence-based treatments. And also interventions that allow earlier diagnosis or prevention of TMD stemming from degenerative causes such as osteoarthritis and from transition from acute to chronic pain states. And this list is not all inclusive. Next slide, please. So what would this look like? How would the collaborative manifest? Shown here are two potential models for how the collaborative could be structured. The first example is a classic model that's frequently used by HEAL, such as in the HEAL backpack or the new HEAL Precision Network. And this consists of a coordinating and data center serving as a central administrative hub and resource supporting specialized research centers. This model is also used by HEAL EpicNet, but with a slight modification in that the coordinating and data center functions are split into two centers. Another possible model, depending on the input of NIH-IC partners, is to structure the collaborative as a cluster of specialized centers. The Dental, Oral, and Craniofacial Tissue Regeneration Consortium, or DOCTOR, utilizes this structure, which is comprised of two clusters or groups of collaborative U24 centers. Next slide, please. So I'll conclude with a depiction of an early example of an interactome used in integrative and systems biology from the lab of Kichiro Ono at UCSD. This is an illustration of the thousands of known genetic and molecular interactions occurring inside our bodies. And this is simply being used here to illustrate the point that this collaborative capitalizes on the idea of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. By bringing together essential complementary resources and disciplines, as well as diverse thinking and approaches to focus on targeted, prioritized research questions and challenges, we can obtain the greater than benefit, the advantage that a multi-level coordinated partnership can deliver that is over and beyond what single investigators can deliver. So with this, I'll turn this over to our council member discussants, Dr. Clark Sanford and Dr. Catherine Alvarez. Thank you.
So hello, everyone. So I'm Clark Sanford. So again, thank you, Dr. Ghim, for the presentation. We had, Dr. Alvarez and I had the opportunity on the 7th of January to review this with you, and thank you for your time. This is an outgrowth, just so the council knows, this is an outgrowth of the actions and opportunities that came out of the Institute of Medicine report that then led to a inter-council working group that worked through COVID. We never actually got the chance to meet face-to-face, but we worked over time to come up with the construct to help NIDCR in terms of how to respond to that Institute of Medicine report. One of the things that came out of this was the idea that TMJD is not an entity that lies within any one discipline or lies within any one institute. Historically, many times, because TMJD tends to have a management by the dental community as one potential group, it has fallen to NIDCR, and this led to the great work that was done by Bill Maxner with the OPERA study. But the question now arises, is it time for a new day? and to really bring in many of the other collaborative groups that have expertise that don't necessarily get applied to the aspects and issues of TMJD. As you heard earlier in the director's report, NIDCR is starting to address this with a new RFA to deal with, at the cellular level, what may be underlying potential mechanisms to target. Historically, when you look at the IONC report, the aspect that there is at least 30 different heterogeneous health disorders associated with the TMJD only emphasizes that there is a significant amount of work that is needed at the basic discovery level so that basic mechanisms can be targeted, so that there is then the potential for greater understanding of prevention, followed by diagnosis, and then, as you heard earlier, relevant evidence-based therapeutic interventions that actually have evidence to show significant patient-related outcomes of care. What was proposed here is the first step in our conversations. This is a national interdisciplinary, and I think the important part here is this is not going to be something that lies within NIDCR, but NIDCR would be able to take the lead in terms of bringing together a variety of different investigators, and I would include patient-oriented groups because their voice is needed in terms of the outcome measures, and they're actually incredibly important in terms of the social media of being able to get the correct scientific messaging out. And so from day one, that would be, to me, something to highly recommend as a part of such a consortium is bringing in the patient-related communities of interest into this. A key part of this is also the training of the next generation. As you heard earlier, training for NIDCR is extremely important, but what we're talking about here is the team science education and training that is needed around complex issues of chronic pain and disabilities that can be associated with this. And that's why this concept, if you will, of a collaboration is critically important, in my opinion, to move forward. And I would strongly encourage council to endorse this. Thank you. Dr. Alvarez.
Yes, I totally support and agree with everything I said. This is such a needed area for research in terms of the clinical outcomes as well as at the basic science level. We just don't know enough about this really complex joint, about how pain related to TMD disorder or conditions, many times they intersect with other inflammatory conditions of the body. And so this would be an opportunity to really get a hold on what types of patient groups are out there in terms of the types of TMDs, and to really relate it back to basic science studies in order to develop approaches that will be effective in treating these disorders. I know several people that have TMDs, and it's remarkable that, you know, as a person in the pain research field, you speak to them and you say, well, were you treated and did it work? Almost every time, no. Some resolution, but it never was treated sufficiently. And so there's such a need here to really understand what's going on with these disorders. And this is certainly it's an ambitious initiative, but it's so necessary to advance understanding in this area. So I really, I support approval of this concept by the council.
Are there any other questions or comments from council?
Lynn, it's Joel Strom calling. How are you doing?
Good.
I support everything that's been said, so I won't go over it much from my personal standpoint, but there's one area that I learned about recently that has been effective, at least in our area of town here in Los Angeles, and that has to do with TMS treatment and apnea, and learning a little bit more about how that's all intertwined with TMJ, can be intertwined with TMD issues. So I'd like to put a word in the focus on sleep-related causes and then therefore treatments. that might be investigated. As you see, sleep apnea goes down, sleeping better, bruxism goes down. There's a lot of, from my perspective, a lot of interrelated issues that come up with sleep, the concept of proper sleep and TMD pain. And my patients that I've worked with, I found that to be very effective. So I know one of the bullet points included psychosocial factors. Maybe that's where it might fit. But if you do a cluster approach, perhaps there would be one that's related to sleep issues.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not, would a member of council like to make a motion recommendation to approve this concept?
This is Amy Slip. I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay. Dr. Zhang Chen, the program officer for the